This appeared, at least as it was being reported in the West, was like spiraling out of control. The night of January 8th, and then into the early morning hours of January 9th, Iran moved to shut down the internet. And in shutting down the internet, they shut down the Starlink terminals. Once they cut that off, these protests dried up. And in fact, what we did see were millions of Iranians take to the streets, not to protest the Ayatollah Khamenei, but to protest in support of Khamenei. And what made that so significant is this was being done with the internet down. It's not like you could argue they used the internet to gin up this, rent-a-crowd. It was at that point that the people briefing Trump on the impending military operation had to tell him, we can't guarantee that it's going to be that the military strike will be decisive and tipping over the government and forcing an abdication by Khamenei. So they called it off. They postponed it, and they're now still moving military personnel and equipment to the region. They're going to do it, and the big difference this time is, unlike on 12 June, the 12-day war that started June 13th. This time, Iran's got the full backing of Russia and China. They didn't have that
more than during the 12-day war.
Oh, they didn't have it before. In fact, Russia had actually proposed a mutual defense treaty along the lines of what it has with North Korea. And Iran said, no, we don't want that. It was like they preferred to do it on their own. So up to that point, Iran really was trying to do it on its own. And part of it was driven by religious belief. They didn't want to be put, Iran has never been a country that's launched attacks, preemptive attacks against others, despite Western propaganda. The numbers are quite clear. And yet the West persists in pushing this mythology that Iran is this irredeemable terrorist state. They've carried out all these terrorist attacks, all lies, but that's the storyline that the West runs with.
So when you say the full backing of China and Russia, how far do you think China and Russia will go? How far will they back Iran in this war?
There are at least Russian technicians, soldiers on the ground operating air defense systems. China has also provided air defense systems. China reportedly, in this latest, in shutting down the Starlink terminals, played a very important role in that regard. So they're not. I don't see China or Russia standing idly by and letting the West just come in and attack. Because China's also got an economic interest here. Iran's made it very clear: if attacked, it's going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz accounts for 45% of the world's oil production on a daily basis. Comes out of the Gulf. So you tell me what the economic impact of turning off 45% of the oil to the world. Those countries that are oil producers that are outside the Persian Gulf, they'll be doing great. Russia will be its oil will be a hot commodity. Nigeria, those are the major ones. But
what do you obviously it's going to be a godsend for Russia. You guys are getting further distracted and oil prices are up. But going back to Iran, what do you make of the numbers that we've seen, the brutality of that crackdown? Would you trust the numbers that are coming out of there of 15 up to 55, 15, 20,000? The low numbers were 4,000 to 5,000. That's on the low end, and up to 15, 20,000.
Understand that much of the number and information about what was supposedly happening on the ground in Iran was being generated by Western intelligence. Okay? Go back to 2004. In 2004 in Iraq, the United States had incarcerated the Mujahideen al-Khalq, MEK, a terrorist organization put on the U.S. list of international terrorist groups in 1997. And they had been carrying out terrorist attacks since 1964. They were variously described as a Marxist Islamist group. There's a weird combination for you. But the CIA started working with them in 2004. And then by 2009,
Marxist, I can't get this out of my head, a Marxist Islamic group.
yeah. Think, oh boy, that's like a platypus, So the CIA started using mech to carry out terrorist attacks inside Iran. There were a number of news outlets with Iranian dissidents outside the country that were pushing news stories that were portraying, mass deaths, protests. Uh, During this entire process, I've talked to both Professor Morandi, but then also Nima Al-Rashid. Nima he's a professor, an engineering professor in Brazil, but he grew up in Iran, got his degree in Germany, and then moved to Brazil and has been living there for 12 years. So he just went back on December 25th for his first visit for his parents. Yeah, and yeah, it was a great timing. But he was telling me from the outset that I was sharing with him what was being reported in the West, and he was going, "We're not seeing that." He says that's not what's happening. Then when the violence started, again, it was very localized. One of the things you can do, when I was with CIA, I worked the propaganda arm of the Afghan task force for 8 weeks. They were in my first year of training. We were getting exposed to certain areas, so I got to see how the propaganda is done, and that's what we were witnessing. It was the information that was coming out of Iran was more to shape public opinion in the West, to convince the West that there was all this upheaval, all this support for the alternative, for the Shah, the son of the Shah, and that there was zero support for the Islamic Republic. It was just the opposite. In fact, the millions who came into the street following that were the internet was down, so there was no way to gin up that size of crowd through social media because
for the crowds, but for the regime supporters, they could easily rally those supporters. If the internet is down, the internet is being used by the opposition protesters. The regime protesters could just be rallied by TV. I think there were calls on TV by the regime for them to hit the streets.
Yeah, but
I'm not saying I'm not saying, so just to kind of give you my stance so you understand where I stand on this. I'm very critical of the regime. I also know that the sanctions played a key role. It's all a strategy to weaken the regime to a level where people are fed up with the economy. Now you added a wrench to the discussion by saying even the collapse that they were just collapsed could have also been initiated by the intelligence. But even if that's not the case, the sanctions alone just crippled the economy for so many years.
Yeah.
And that made the people suffer, made people rise up against the regime. Now we know Mossad's admitted having assets on the ground. I think it's no secret. I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA...
Mike Pompeo said it as well. Former CIA director. So I'm not making some fantasy up. This was an orchestrated operation by intelligence. The thing to understand, there is a difference between being upset with the government. Let's use the UK as an example. If somebody hates Starmer, does that mean they hate the king? No. It could be just the opposite. And what you've got in Iran right now is there maybe a majority of people that dislike Pezeshkian? Sure. But that doesn't mean that they want to get rid of the Islamic Republic. And again, the propaganda that the West floods its people with. And I was on in a conference call a week ago Tuesday with a retired 4-star general, and he was referring to how the Iranians have killed thousands of Americans. It's not true. Go to Grok, go to whichever, take any of the AI platforms you like, type in how many American civilians have been killed by Iran since 1979. The answer I got off of Grok was 0 to 50. Okay, well, let's look at these proxies. Iran uses proxies such as Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Type that in. The number that comes back, fewer than 700 over, 47 years. Okay, how about military? Surely, because there were Iranian proxies that were attacking U.S. soldiers that had occupied illegally Iraq. The number, fewer than 1,000. Now, I'm not trying to minimize those deaths, but if we use the same standard of a country using a proxy to attack another country, which the United States did to Iran in 1980, working with Saddam Hussein, encouraging Hussein to attack, providing the precursor chemicals that were used to produce mustard gas. 500,000 Iranians were killed. And the West wonders, why do those Iranians chant death to America? Because we have killed so many more Iranians by multiples than Iran has done to the United States. And Iran has always been reacting, not proacting, reacting to the United States. We talk about the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, October 1983. Well, what the hell did the United States battleships do in September of 1983 but shell Shia Muslim positions in the Bekaa Valley, killing Shia Muslim civilians? And then we're shocked when they retaliate and kill Americans? Mario, this is the problem. We have been gaslit over the last 47 years to believe that Iran is this awful, terrible person. What Iran has been doing has been fighting to try to defend Shia Muslims in places where they have been repeatedly attacked and murdered by Zionists. That's a fact. And the United States has gone along with it. We haven't intervened to say, hey, we got to have a fair thing here. And it goes back to 1953 when Kermit Roosevelt, the son of Theodore Roosevelt, helped lead the coup that overthrew a democratically elected government. So America sits around in its ignorance, wondering, why do those Iranians hate us? They hate us because of our freedom. No, they hate us because of what we've done.